I'm the county administrator. I want to welcome you here. We have as well with us tonight Mr. Rocket Charlie, Mr. Patuck, and Mr. Duke from our Planning Commission. And we have Mr. Spoonhauer from the Board of Supervisors. We have Mr. Lumpkins from the Board of Supervisors. Mrs. Lascalette and Mr. Vaughters were unable to be here tonight, either for family situations or being out of town. So again, we want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm going to introduce now our Deputy County Administrator, Ms. Crystal Anitis, to kick the things off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's a packed house, which I guess could be one of two things, right? Really good or kind of not so good. So I want to kind of go into tonight's agenda and what we're going to work on covering. So want to introduce what we're trying to accomplish here tonight, the purpose of our open house, the next steps for these proposed small area plans, because again, at this time, they're still proposed plans. We'll have a presentation from our consultants, Timmons Group, and at the end, we will have an opportunity for you all as audience members to ask questions or work to obtain clarification on these proposed small area plans. So a little more on that as to, so why are we here this evening? So the purpose of tonight is really to ensure that you are informed and educated on what is in these proposed plans. So ahead of our upcoming public hearings, that you're able to come as an informed citizen and express your thoughts on that. So again, these are proposed plans, and our goal is to make sure that we're highlighting the core points of these plans for you all. And again, we will be here to answer questions. We have copies of the plans in the back. We have some picture boards. So that's the main purpose. So when we ask where have we been in this planning process, if you've been along for the ride, it's been a long ride. Actually, like 6 months ago, it was like my first community meeting and I was kind of thrust into this. I will say that we've taken an intentional and deliberate step back where we found ourselves in November. End of November, right after Thanksgiving, we had an open house for these plans. It was not reflective of community values. It did not adequately reflect in any way the input we received, and it just did not resonate with anything that was Goochland. So we took that to heart as staff, as members of the board and planning commissioners, and we wanted to make sure we got it right. So we took a little extra time, took a step back, and tried to pare it down and make sure that we highlighted things that were necessary and applicable to Goochland. So in that, I wanted just to stress that in these 14 months, one of the things that we've learned as our core values is, using public input to create public value, and that is one of the core goals of this plan, to be reflective and representative of Goochland, as I've mentioned, and to have realistic as well as relative plans that have intentional and thoughtful growth. So, this is one of our designated growth areas. So how can we have thoughtful and intentional growth that serves a purpose for Goochland and the surrounding areas as we continue to grow? This is just a quick slide on our upcoming dates. We do have an open house for Courthouse later this week on Thursday. We have public hearings coming up with our Planning Commission for May 22nd for Courthouse Village, May 24th for Centerville. And again, we'll have our Board of Supervisors public hearings in June, roughly the second week of June. So I want to also really stress to you all that these proposed plans, if adopted, in the coming months after being adopted, if they are in June, then staff will begin working on amendments to current zoning ordinances, design review, guidelines, and requirements. So there's no immediate change that comes from these plans just being plans. The real meat and potatoes is in action steps that then will be taken with the guidance of the planning commissioners and the members of the board expressing that they want to follow through or that there's certain things that we do need to update so that we can make sure that we put the plan into action. But the plan in of itself is a plan. And so for that, now I'm going to transition it over to Chuck Rapp with Timmons Group, and he will take it from here for you all. Oh, yeah, I was going to take that with me.
All right, thank you. First, I'd like to just say thanks everyone for taking the time this evening to come out to hear more about these plans, to provide some feedback, help us answer some questions, and really work through these with y'all as a community. So With that, tell you a little bit about our presentation for this evening. Start off with some introductions to the Timmins Group team, what a little bit about our firm, our project objective, what our approach was throughout this process. One thing we did, we created an introduction to small area plans. So we're going to go over that as well, and then we'll dive into the details of our draft Centerville small area plan, and then take a pause for questions from the audience. All right, so a little bit about Timmins. Like Crystal said, my name is Chuck Rapp. I'm a senior project manager with Timmins. Timmins is a multidiscipline firm. We have engineering, we have transportation, traffic engineers, we have civil engineers, we have urban planners, we have landscape architects, we have GIS specialists. So we really have a pretty wide variety of talents that we pulled from to put this together as a team. We have some of our planners that worked on this plan here this evening. And again, we pulled from folks from all different backgrounds to try and address the different facets of this plan. This is an example of our timeline I wanted to start with, just to kind of recap this long process that Crystal mentioned at the beginning here. This plan started back in February of 2022. And it involved a lot of stakeholder input. There were community surveys, there were community meetings, there were roundtables. And we're really coming in at the tail end of this. If you remember, we were brought in a few months ago, earlier this year. And so we really spent a lot of time trying to absorb everything that took place over the past year. Our team spent several weeks just diving into the community input, reading through the surveys, watching the videos, reading notes, meeting with staff, trying to get a grasp on the community's take, the community's input, all the processes that had happened to date, so that we made sure to capture that as we put together this draft plan. So I wanted to talk about what's different about our approach to this plan, compared to the draft plans that the prior consultant worked on. So one thing we wanted to do was really establish a plan structure that was easy to navigate, so you could quickly turn to the different aspects of this plans, and it was user-friendly. So you'll see, here's an example of our draft table of contents. It's one of the things we really thought the last plan was lacking, was that structure to really tie into the different topics that you want to build upon as you work towards a future land use map, and then eventually bringing that all together into recommended next steps, so that this really provides this roadmap for the county to implement over time. We wanted to really capture a vision statement, some guiding principles to guide our work here based on the community input and the feedback from the stakeholders throughout that prior year before we started on this. And really make sure that the decisions and the proposed elements throughout the plan reflect that vision statement and those guiding principles. We also wanted to make this plan clear and easy to follow. So you'll see repeating maps throughout this plan, the same kind of map layered with different material as you work through it. We try to take things into a graphic format so that it's easy for the reader to follow along. So it's using infographics or bulleted points. What we wanted to try to do is get away from long, lengthy text descriptions that are hard to follow and hard to get the takeaways from. So it should be very easy to find exactly what we're recommending as you go through these plans. And then last, we really wanted to make sure that these plans were relevant to Goochland County. They were realistic, they were applicable, and they really achieved the vision that y'all had as a community. So I want to take a few minutes just to talk about small area plans. What are they? How are they supposed to be used? What they aren't. So any future land use plan, this is basically an appendix to a comprehensive plan. It's usually a little bit more detailed, a little more of a focused area. And the idea there is this is a 10 to 20 year vision. So this is a long-term approach. It really identifies things of how you want to evolve as a community. It's really used to guide future rezoning decisions that might come before the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. What it is not is a change to existing zoning. This does not change any existing zoning on a property. Again, this is a vision document. It is not a legally binding thing that changes what you can do on your property as it sits now. It's just a guide for the future so that you have this as a roadmap to reference when some of these decisions need to be made in the future. It really focuses on establishing the character of how this community is going to evolve over time. And that focuses on things like the built environment and what that might look like, or protection of resources and things like that, infrastructure improvements. It really also aligns that development so that as things take place over time, redevelopment happens, new developments come, it's done in a way that relates back to the capital improvements plan for the locality so that you have measurable growth and infrastructure follows the pace of any type of development that comes your way. And then last, it really encourages efficient use of land. So by concentrating development into a certain area, it utilizes that existing infrastructure, that existing investment that's already been made. And it also helps to preserve the rural character of the rest of the county so that you do preserve that quality that I think most folks live in Goochland County for by concentrating it in a well thought out, planned pattern for growth. So one of the things we wanted to do also is just at the start of our introduction chapter, Introduction to Small Area Plans, is just to provide some regional context, just some basic maps to help orient a reader where things are in these maps. So where's Goochland County? This shows the relationship to Richmond. This shows the relationship to Charlottesville and the major transportation corridors running there. And it also shows where the small area plan, the Courthouse Village and the Centerville Small Area Plan boundaries are in relation to Goochland County, to help understand how that fits together as part of this whole plan for the county's future land use. We also took a look at the transportation corridors. So we wanted to identify where's traffic coming from. This was done in the previous drafts, but it was pretty heavy. And so we wanted to just graphically show where is this transportation coming from. And so you see a lot of the traffic along the 64 corridor, some traffic coming up 288 and Route 60, but primarily a lot of inward and outward migration from Richmond to particularly to the Centerville area. So it affects how we plan for these two areas differently. Also took a look at the primary employers that are in both of these areas. And you can see there's a lot of primarily private sector employers centered around the Centerville location. And that certainly has a bearing on how we want to plan for Centerville long term. Whereas Courthouse Village is much more focused on a lot of public sector. You have the county administration offices, you have school administration offices, you have correctional facility, you have the community college there. So you have a bit of a different makeup going on there from an employment perspective. One of the last things we really wanted to do, sifting through all of the public input, was really try to pull out what are some of the key elements that kept popping up in the public input that we read through and that we discussed with county staff and that we saw in some of the videos and the surveys. And really kind of came away with what we felt were 4 repeating themes that kept popping up. One was really an emphasis on promoting small business, creating opportunities for small businesses in both of these areas. Another was an emphasis on ensuring built form is contextually sensitive to the existing buildings that already exist here, so that when new development comes, it has a similar character, or at least matches well with what you already have here and continues that forward. A heavy emphasis on public space, walkable public space. We're talking about sidewalks, we're interconnectivity, trying to create ways to get safely multimodal transportation from one place to another. And then last, really preserving that community character. Trying to find ways to bring what's special about Goochland County into these areas to create a sense of identity and ensure that isn't lost as development takes place over time. All right, with that, I'm going to dive into the specifics on Centerville. And as I mentioned, we wanted to identify some guiding principles, some vision elements to help us as we worked on these draft plans. And so here we have 5 vision elements that we really focused on. You'll see these start to come to life as we talk about the different topics throughout this plan. The first one for Centerville specifically was placemaking. You have a lot of commercial development already in Centerville. I'm sure more will come just with the interchanges and some of the area that you have there. So we want to find ways to really create a sense of community, a sense of place when you arrive in Centerville and really capture that and ensure that isn't lost over time. There's a lot of great economic development opportunities here in the surrounding area as well as within the Centerville Small Area Plan boundaries. So we want to find ways to capitalize that and carry that forward from previous planning efforts with the county. As I mentioned earlier, we want well-planned infrastructure and services. We want to make sure that infrastructure keeps pace with development so that you have the high-level services here in the county, in the Small Area Plan. One of the things we certainly heard, especially from the Planning Commission and a lot of the public input, was access to outdoor recreation, a big focus on greenways and creating some parks. In Centerville, there really is not much public park access at all. And so we've identified some opportunities for that for the county to explore moving forward. And the last, as I mentioned, natural resource protection and growth absorption. The ability for the small area to absorb some growth in a well planned out way so that you can preserve that rural character of the rest of the county. So we have here is just a base map, and I wanted to just provide an example of our base map that we build on each of these different topics. And so one thing we wanted to do here, as I mentioned, was create something that's really easy to navigate. You can quickly orient yourself. The major roadways are labeled. So some special places of interest are labeled. The Broadview Shopping Center, you have Mannequin Market, you have the fire station, some things to quickly orient yourself as to where you are when you're looking at these maps. And you'll see that repeated again so that hopefully they're easy to navigate. All right, so starting with transportation, you'll see there's a big emphasis on transportation throughout our plans, our draft plans, because I think there's a strong connection between transportation and land use. The two really need to be tied together. You need to make sure that infrastructure is there for wherever any type of development might be existing or in the future to come. So the first thing we did was just take an inventory of the road systems, of the sidewalks. And so we dive into the different types of classifications of roadways and where existing sidewalks are so that we can then plan for how those may need to be improved over time or filled in where there's some missing gaps. So we go through each of the street classifications that exist in the small area plan, and these are classifications that the VDOT adopts, and so this is carrying that forward. So you have here local streets. Local streets are low capacity, more residential neighborhoods. And one thing I will say throughout this, we kept with either existing roads or roads that have been approved, either through a development or have been part of the county's transportation plan. We didn't create a bunch of new roads here. That wasn't our goal, was to create something totally different. So we're just carrying things forward that are already existing or approved or part of some plans that were previously adopted. So what we did too here, you'll see with each of these street categories, is we provide a typical section. And this is ideally, the local road where you want to have sidewalks on either side as developments come forward. Maybe street trees on the back of that sidewalk, a little lower capacity, but that again enhances the pedestrian access throughout the area. It can be used as a guide as a development comes forward, so that you have something to look to as to what type of street should be proposed with developments or when opportunities arise. Collector streets are the next classification. It's more of a medium capacity, and this is one where there is some good opportunity here in the Centerville small area to bring forth some of these collector streets to create that secondary road network so that all traffic isn't funneled out onto one road. And it kind of creates an opportunity as well to create that multimodal component where you could potentially incorporate bike lanes within the roadway, sidewalks, and tree-lined streets, and start to kind of create, again, that sense of place that I mentioned that we can start to bring forth here. And there's some great opportunities there to maybe separate some of the mixed-use areas from the residential areas with streets like this. Height, and then arterial roads. I mean, you have two main roads here in Centerville, Broad Street as well as Ashland. And these are larger roads. Moving traffic is really the main goal of these roads. So you're talking about often 4-lane roads like we have at Broad Street. And it's a great opportunity in these type of roads to create a multi-use path, separate bicyclists or pedestrians from that roadway. And so that's what we kind of show here in this street section is an opportunity to either do a sidewalk or a multi-use path along that roadway and create a little bit of safety for that multimodal component. Now here, one thing we wanted to do, when we were walking around Centerville the times we were here, is trying to find opportunities. So, we found ourselves oftentimes walking in the middle of the road. There wasn't sidewalks, and I certainly would say that it is a little intimidating to try and cross Broad Street. There's a lot of traffic, it's moving fast. So wanted to just provide an opportunity to think about a crosswalk. And this is an example of what's called a mid-block crossing. When you're crossing 5 lanes of traffic, you want to have what's called a pedestrian refuge island in the middle, recognizing it's pretty hard to go across all 5 lanes in one approach. So this just shows an example of what it could be, and that's where something we would encourage the county and their transportation planning department to kind of explore that and find opportunities when they arise, or in combination with developments or things like that. Another element that this illustration shows is this idea of trying to just create that sense of place and something unique as well. One thing, there's actually some existing horse fence on one side, on the opposite side of the shopping center there, and so we thought we could repeat that element. There certainly is a lot of equestrian farms in Goochland County, so we thought maybe that's a way to kind of bring some of the placemaking elements, that community character into the streetscape here. So we're showing an idea of a horse fence with a nice shrub row, just to kind of create that softer environment there. As I mentioned, there's a lot of interest in greenways connectivity. There's some great stream corridors, actually on either side of Broad Street that run through the neighborhoods. And so those are often great opportunities to incorporate greenway trails, interconnect neighborhoods to certain places. And so what we've done is provide some descriptions and some information on the different types of greenway trails that you often see. So you have paved paths. Those are typically along roadways where you have the multi-use path up against the roadway. As I showed in the previous image, you have trails, which are often natural surface, crushed stone, running along a stream corridor. And then when you want to get into more of a wet area, you want to do a raised boardwalk to protect that ecosystem. And so then this is, again, these options, so that as opportunities present themselves, developments come forward in the Centerville area, you can kind of pick and choose and identify the right solution for that scenario. So what we did, we brought all of that together in one comprehensive map. So this map shows the proposed collector streets, the local streets, the greenways, the multi-use paths, the sidewalks to create this interconnected network of transportation throughout the area. And this will really help to complete that so that there's multiple ways of getting around multiple modes of traffic, and it can be used as a guide, again, as things come forward, as opportunities present themselves to be implemented. As I mentioned, we also, a lot of the feedback also talked about access to recreation, to open space. It was discussed when we met with the Planning Commission as well that there really wasn't an option here. So we're proposing two kind of options here. On the southern side, where you have more of the residential neighborhoods, as I mentioned, there's some great stream corridors. Those would be great for greenways, and those are oftentimes perfect opportunities to explore park spaces, whether they're an open floodplain or things like that. So we're not specifying any particular location here. We're just encouraging the county to look for that and explore that in time to hopefully provide that opportunity for outdoor recreation for residents, particularly as developments come forward and residential subdivisions are developed. On the northern side, we thought it would be great. So, you have the existing shopping center, and one of the things we noticed is there's really not a great opportunity to walk around. There's not many sidewalks on the internal streets. People are really commuting there. You're getting out of your car, you're shopping, you're getting back in your car, and you're driving away. So we thought a great sense of place would be to create a small kind of plaza. And so whether that's just some small seating, a little playground, some little walking paths, just an opportunity to gather in a place to kind of meet as a community while you're shopping, in a way to get together and to see other people, and maybe stay a little longer. And that kind of ties into some of the other improvements that you see as well for that area. Also wanted to address public-private partnerships. We think there's some great opportunities here as well. Kind of along that Parks and Recreation vein, there's the Bogey Sports Park. Has some great infrastructure in it right now, and maybe I would recommend the county explore ways to make that more accessible to the general public, and really capitalize on that existing infrastructure that's here, as well as Mannequin Market. Whether it's in Mannequin Town, if it moves forward, or a new location, a farmer's market is a great opportunity for a community asset, and we want to encourage the county to find a permanent home for that as well, and to help strengthen that. So now we'll get into the topic that I'm sure most of y'all are more interested in, which is land use. This is our draft land use map, and we'll go through each one of these in a little bit of detail here tonight. One thing that I would just like to at least emphasize is our goal here was to simplify this as well. The previous draft had, I believe, 11 different categories of land use. It was extremely complex. There were overlays in it. Overlays are more of a zoning regulation, so while there may be some recommendations to explore overlays, I would say they don't belong on a land use map. That would be done through a zoning ordinance because it's more of a regulatory tool. And so you'll see here, we kept a lot of the similar land use approaches, but just simplified. And we'll get into each one as I walk through them here. So starting with the mixed use core, which is really where you have a lot of existing commercial infrastructure, the Broadview Shopping Center. Wanted to identify that really as this walkable town center. And so how do we do that? We incorporate some additional uses. Whether that be retail, service, office, or residential, to kind of create that mixture. And then you'll see here this building diagram. This is not meant, I'll just say, this is not meant to be representative of the architecture of these areas. This is really just a massing diagram to show how buildings should be oriented on a site, maybe how tall they should be. So we felt 3 stories, that matches what was proposed in Mannequin Town, and kind of the height of a typical grocery store and some of the stuff that's out there. So we felt it matched on this side. And what we're recommending is those larger setbacks on Broad Street, where you really have that higher traffic. You're not really going to have that storefront feel, but on the reverse side, you'll see we have a diagram there of what would be a sidewalk and bringing that building closer to the roadway there so that you do kind of create that storefront feel, and maybe you create that smaller engaging atmosphere, that pedestrian realm on the backside of those buildings. Currently, when you walk through there, you're kind of seeing the back of all the buildings, and it's not very approachable. And so we think there's a great opportunity to kind of really center something around the shopping centers and the existing infrastructure by providing some additional pedestrian experiences, window shopping type feel on those internal roads. And to kind of further that, show an example of, in that central commercial core there, this is just a quick diagram that we created that shows that larger setback on Broad Street, which matches the pattern out there. You have enhanced landscape requirements already in your zoning ordinance, so this just builds on that and honors that. But again, it brings the potential building closer to that internal roadway network with sidewalks on it. And then here is where we have some additional space at a corner. That's where we encourage those placemaking elements. So whether it's a small fountain or it's a sign or just a small little seating plaza or something like that, you want to encourage that type of incorporation into future development so that you do have some unique elements that help to capture the essence of this area. All right, going across Broad Street, one thing we would acknowledge is that Broad Street is what it is. It's a large corridor. It does bisect the small area plan. And so the two areas we felt needed to be treated differently. On the southern side of Broad Street, you have really a transition to residential behind it. You have a significant amount of existing residential development. And so we wanted to treat this area differently. So you'll see in these diagrams, we have a similar approach as far as setbacks go to Broad Street, trying to create those internal roadways on the backside, more of a pedestrian realm that would connect to the existing residential developments or future residential developments, but the buildings are of a smaller scale in this transitional area. So it's still mixed use. It honors what's along Broad Street now, allows some additional uses, whether that be more retail, service, office, or maybe small-scale residential on a second floor. So you could kind of have that. We're not talking about large apartment buildings or anything like that, but hopefully that would relate better to the existing residential uses behind it. And again, provide those connections to the neighborhood through sidewalk infrastructure. Next, we'll go into mixed-use commercial. So you do have major interchanges in this small area boundary. And so oftentimes, you have this is where we see things like uses for community access to goods and services. These are often auto-centric, where you are driving there, you're getting out of your car, you're getting in it, you're getting back on the highway, you're getting off the highway. It's really where you have a lot of movement from an automobile perspective. So where you may have some larger buildings here, as you see in the diagram, we encourage those to be set back significantly further from the roadway. We also would say if you do have something that goes up to a fourth story, that's where we would recommend a step back. A step back is where you just push that top floor back so that you avoid that canyon effect and bring those buildings down to scale a little bit with that step back. Also mentioned economic development. This area has a lot of economic development potential, and we're really carrying this idea forward from previous plans that the county had in place and recommending additional studies here. So economic development land is really focused on large-scale employment, high concentration of jobs. And this is where we recommend that the county begin development of a strategic business plan to target those specific industries of what fits Goochland and what is the desired businesses out there. Moving forward to the residential development, and you'll see kind of a pattern here. So we have the commercial core right in the center there, and as you work your way out to the edges of the small area plan, the intensity of the uses should gradiate down so that it blends all the way down towards you get to the rural area outside of the village. So kind of wrapping around some of the commercial core is this neighborhood residential. That's more walkable neighborhoods where you might have houses a little bit closer to the street, focused on a sidewalk, maybe some shared amenity spaces, 2 to 4 units per acre. So we're talking about quarter acre or half acre lots. Nothing much more than that, but it does provide a little better relationship to a mixed use area, and then a good transition to the next category, which is single family residential, which most people understand is the larger home sites, larger setbacks, more of your traditional residential development. As you see, a couple of examples of those types of houses there. Less than 2 units per acre, so it's a good transition into that rural area as you get to the edge of the boundary there. So we also wanted to do with residential form, was provide some guidance, some building diagrams here of what those types of buildings would be and where they might fit in these different zones. So you have illustration there for townhomes, your attached units. You can have maybe 4 in a row or however many that are allowed through that development that's approved. And those are, again, a little bit higher density. Those would fit great in the mixed-use core, in the mixed-use transition, and the neighborhood residential. And you see we put those as a secondary use in the mixed-use commercial. Because we really want to leave that mixed-use commercial for commercial uses as it's the most viable option out there. But it would be appropriate as a secondary use. Duplex units, the two units attached. Again, really mainly just appropriate in that neighborhood residential where you can have a slightly higher density and it fits kind of that more integrated neighborhood feel. Single-family cluster lots where you might have some slightly smaller lots, those quarter-acre lots, those half-acre lots. Oftentimes you have shared amenity spaces, as I mentioned, and those would be appropriate in the neighborhood residential and single-family residential if it was on a larger lot size in that single-family residential. So you have to scale it to the correct zone. And the last is the single-family residential, which is really just that last category of the larger lot size that most people are more familiar with. Another thing we wanted to do is tie this to some land use regulatory controls that would help to achieve this vision. And so what this chart does, I'm not going to read through it, but it identifies what the intent of these different land use zones are, and then identifies the type of uses that would be appropriate that we would recommend within it, whether they are primary use or a secondary use. The secondary use is basically supportive of a primary use, so that's not what you could have if that's all you had. And then we've tied it to the existing zoning designation in your zoning categories here in Goochland County, and some of those do have recommendations for zoning ordinance amendments. That's where you see that third bullet there, zoning ordinance amendments, where maybe the mixed use, right now there's a mixed use PUD, and it's a very large scale PUD. So if you wanted to have some smaller mixed use infill in some of that existing commercial areas, you would need to adjust that zoning ordinance. So again, they're just recommendations for a county to follow as when they choose. Others, as I mentioned earlier, design standards, furthering some of those design standards to start to address the building form so that you do get into some of the specifics of building design, window placement, heights, and some of those once those things are codified in the zoning ordinance, they have a lot more teeth. As a land use plan like this, it's really just a guide. So that's that next step that was mentioned that would need to happen to bring that forward. Same with entrance corridor overlays. Right now, there are some overlays along the corridors, but they certainly could be strengthened to, again, start to address building form at a more detailed level, as well as some of those landscaping controls and things like that. Then towards the end of the plan, we bring everything together. We pull out the recommendations from each of these sections into a matrix for recommended next steps. So the county has a roadmap to follow and can pick these different elements and implement them over time. So hopefully this is something that you can come back to in a few years, and I hope hopefully some of these things are checked off. Some of this has been accomplished, and you continue to work your way through here as you do routine reviews of your land use documents. And then with that, as mentioned, I know it was touched on earlier, just wanted to touch base on upcoming dates. 2 evenings from now, we'll be going over the courthouse village master plan. Then we'll have planning commission public hearings the next week in May. And then in mid-June, we will be coming back for board of supervisors public hearings as well. So with that, I believe we are going to pause for questions.
Thank you. So before we get to questions, we're going to first work through the folks that have signed up to have questions or clarification on the plan. And then we will try to work through the audience as time permits. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jamie Sherry, our Community Development Director for that part. And we, staff, as well as Timmons, will be here to answer questions.
Thank you. So our first speaker this evening is Mr. Pratt. Robert Pratt, can you identify yourself and we can hand you the microphone?
Yeah, from what I've seen y'all put forward, it looks very good. I think to be able to have residential along with mixed use in a well-designed way with nice houses is a great way to go, and parks. So I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Mr. Costello. Paul Costello.
Hi, let me start with the positives. I have a couple of questions and 2 comments. I think the positives, the format is easier to read and to follow. The future vision statement, I think, does capture future opportunities, and I think the emphasis on the transportation, streetscapes, traffic calming, and greenways is well done. So I think those are the positives. I have specific questions that I would like to share with you that may help address some of my most significant concerns. But I had a couple of questions first. Can you please reconcile the intro chapter images with the mixed use images? Because on the intro chapter, as part of the vision, they look very residential, very small scale. I know on the mixed use core images, you made a point that they were just as placeholders, but they're dramatically different. So my question on that is going to be, as this plan becomes its final presentation, will you update the images to reconcile the two? Because right now they don't. They don't reconcile at all. And I'm happy to, if you want to bring them up later, we can point that out. Just to,
Sure, yeah.
At the beginning, you did an intro slide. So I can back up. Okay, so that's your intro slide.
Sure.
That doesn't look at all, if you go fast forward, to the mixed-use core slide. It's like night and day.
So these are
And I'm curious why they are so dramatically different.
So these are representative images.
I know that, but you're representing this as part of a community goal, which ties to a vision.
Well, and I can speak to it actually. So in the courthouse village plan, we are recommending just 2 stories in the historic area.
So this community goal is for courthouse village, not Centerville?
So the way the introduction section, it could be addressed for both small area plans because it's just as a whole, and it could also be for future small area plans. It's really just an introduction to Goochland County, to what small area plans are.
This plan becomes a very,
sorry, yeah.
I know it's a guide,
Yep.
but people come in and they look at it and they point to it.
Certainly.
So if the goal is to have a visual orientation to intentions and to the vision statement, and you look at this,
Yep.
I think this may be more reflective of community input to date. The other one with the big Innsbruck style, West Creek Park style buildings, do not. So I think that needs to be reconciled. So I just wanted to get that question clarified.
Thanks.
Also, I noticed on the mixed-use core slide in the presentation draft that you put on the website currently, the intent section has been changed. And here you've made some positive improvements. Also, if you go to the mixed-use, it's the regulatory control
Okay.
one. But back up.
There we go.
On the intent there, that is a different intent than I think is on the website. Because on the website, for example, you have lodging. We don't want lodging in a mixed-use core. Nobody wants to have a hotel on Mannequin Road, just to kind of net that. So if that's the intent, I think that's a better intent. But what you have on the website that I looked at this afternoon is different than that. It mentions the word lodging.
Okay.
Right? So those are my questions. In terms of specific recommendations, I think that it does. If you go back to the core, the overall land use map, the proposed future land use map really doesn't consider transition space between mixed-use core and single-family residential west and north of Mannequin Road. So if you see Sycamore Creek, you've got a lot of residential to the left, you've got some other single-family residential above it. It's a very abrupt red residential, mixed use. So you could have, in theory, based on what we go, is a 3-story building that would adjoin any of those residential properties. So what I would recommend is that you maybe use a mixed use at the corner of Broad and Mannequin, mixed use transitional, like you've done south of Broad. And I also think like you've done south of Broad, to maybe have a transition, where you would have the existing family residential and mixed use transitional as kind of that buffer. You go from red to orange to beige to, it's just a transition. That north of Broad in the residential area specifically is very concerning. It's a very abrupt change. And you mentioned 0 to no setbacks in somewhere in your documentation in the red.
Correct.
And I think that's concerning where it joins a neighborhood, existing neighborhoods in particular.
It's a valid point.
Sure, Michael.
I mentioned the mixed-use core illustrations already, so I won't go back. But you do have a human scale. You have the right words. You have that small town feel where you got from all the surveys and what people are looking for. But again, lodging and no setbacks doesn't align with that. And so I would recommend that you update the illustrations. incorporate more small-scale design elements, and limit lodging to proposed mixed-use commercial and economic development areas like we're in right now. And I also think buffers need to be considered. And lastly, I think that the timeline. You're right that it has been a long process, but what we're seeing tonight is a land use map specifically for the first time that's fairly different, significantly different than what we've seen today. I'm just concerned that we're going next week to the Planning Commission for approval and really haven't had a chance to fully digest this before it's on the fast track. It feels a little like it's being rammed through, to be honest with you. So I think we'd like to see, some of these changes that hopefully you'll get more of tonight beyond me, incorporated into this, then go to the Planning Commission, and then present it to the Board of Supervisors in a more thoughtful way, because we have had a very thoughtful process to date. This now, at this point, with this significant change that we're seeing tonight, feels like it's being rammed through, and that just doesn't feel good. So to summarize, I just would say that I don't think that the plan we're seeing tonight, as it pertains to the land use map and the mixed use core specifically, I don't think it reflects the community input and values in that particular area. I think some of the other areas, but you tied in some of the green space and some of the other things that does. So in fairness, I think it has aspects of it, but to say that it fully reflects community input and values and thoughtful growth, I would say that's somewhat of a misrepresentation at this point in the process. I know I've attended all these public meetings, I've reviewed all the public comments. I can say with confidence that a lot of things, particularly in that land use map and how you're defining use for mixed use core, doesn't reflect that. At this point, I just would be disappointed if we go this fast track and that the county representatives are trying to go through a plan that would ultimately diminish our quality of life. I know that's not the intent, but that's what it would feel like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Is this on? Thank you, Mr. Costello.
The next speaker is Scott Gazer.
Good evening, Scott Gazer. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
We wanted to get together with staff and with you to talk about some of these changes, and we feel like we haven't been included. So just to say, first of all, because you inherited this position, we have not met with anyone on the property south of Broad or on Mannequin Town, and we have requested to on many times, but I appreciate your plan, and I think it would have been a lot better if we could have given you input prior. We were able to write things down and deliver them to the county, but we were never able to meet. And like Mr. Costello, this is probably the first time in 30 years that I've been involved in a comp plan change where I haven't been able. So I appreciate you hearing me now, and I just have one question. I think the majority of what you laid out is really good, but it was based on an old map. And you said you had a 20-year plan. I've owned Mannequin Town for 20 years, and we're still trying to get it approved. So it's a process, and so what you've designed here is a lot for 20 years. But the most concerning to me kind of goes to the core. I really want to understand why the core moved. It was south of Broad, it was north of Broad, it was a big part of the MPUD ordinance. In fact, I looked up the ordinance, and it's described in the ordinance as exactly between Mannequin and Hockett, north and south of Broad. So I just want to know what compelled you, because I was born in Richmond. I've been on Broad Street my whole life. When I drive up and down it, it's pretty much, there's a mixture of uses. So we were going in a direction of mixed use. And what I see here is a great separation of uses. And so what bothers me is that I think the people south of Broad, who are all members of the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, none of them in that orange that has changed from core to mixed-use transition were given that opportunity. And when you read the Tuckahoe Creek Service District ordinance, it says that in order to get out of the village, you've got to apply. Okay, but it doesn't say that the county can take you out of the village. It also says that the Tuckahoe Creek Service District is a very valuable asset to the county. So we don't want to do anything that would diminish those values. So I believe by taking the south of Broad Street out of the core, which has been in for 7 years, that you're diminishing the value of the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. Second of all, I had to get a letter from the county because I saw it going in this direction, and I got a letter from Miss Anita Barnes, bless her heart, where we pointed out to the county that all that property south of Broad is owned business, has been since 1969 previously. And so again, my question is, the south of Broad has been in the core, it's been business zoned, it's had Burnell Burton store, it's had Smith's General Store. What is it that took it out of the core?
So I'm certainly happy to talk to our process.
So, I mean, is there a
Yeah.
reason that
Yeah. So
like north and south of Broad would be different? Because it doesn't, I don't see it.
there was, so ours was based on trying to relate to the existing residential neighborhoods and recognizing that we needed to have some kind of a relationship to that versus the prior comment, which was a stark 3-story up against a residential home. So we tried to kind of create that transition
There's 200
where it would exist.
there that I developed.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from, but over the last 20 years, we've tried to create a village.
Certainly.
And it feels like that village has been bifurcated. And so I just want you to hear it. It's
Certainly.
not really for you to answer, it's really for everyone to pick up. I don't think there's been enough public involvement, and especially from the people south of Broad, especially, I got calls tonight from everyone in Orange. So Caudatius, James River, Malin, up to Hockett Road. So thank you for that.
You gotta give it back.
Mr. Pruitt? Thomas Pruitt? Over there. Oh, you signed the wrong sheet. You got your chance, it's your opportunity. Then the next speaker is Cree Carter.
Hi. How are you? Hi, good evening. My name is Cree Carter. I live in Bellevue Gardens. We are the lovely little neighborhood that is squashed in there. And I'm tired of everyone trying to attack us. First of all, they decided they wanted to have goodwill, and we fought it. And we were very fortunate that people listened to what we had to say. When you say that you want to go ahead and enhance and affect the area with character, when you get off of 288, one of our biggest statements we made is like, do you want to get off of Broad Street, turn right and go to Short Pump and see everything you could possibly, or you can go left to Goochland? Oh God, who wants to go there? Don't take us down a road that puts us in the middle of a car dealership. If you look in 2-mile zone of this very spot, you will find more medical, more high-end than you can scream about. So take that lovely little place that we call Bellevue Gardens and make it all around Bellevue, beautiful view. That's exactly what it is. And we want to talk about traffic. Anyone ever been out there with the traffic? Yeah. There's a little cutover at the end of our neighborhood. And you go across that, you are playing Frogger, literally. When you get out there, people are trying to cut the light so they don't have to wait in line to go on 288. So they skip around that, they come to our neighborhood, they zing on past it. It's gotten to be a very dangerous interchange. Across the street from our neighborhood, they're going to put in a heart center. And we were at that development conference to talk about it. And the first thing we mentioned was traffic. When has been the last study of how much traffic is there now? I know it's not. Please, we're talking about noise. At nighttime, we can hear the trucks grinding their gears coming across 64, getting onto 288. We want to talk about noise reduction panels. We want to talk about a berm around our daggone neighborhood. Anything to protect the value and the quality of life that we have offered Goochland County. It's not just Goochland County offering to us. We started this county and we want to stay here, but you're driving us crazy with these new plans. I don't know what to say other than the fact that I would really like to go ahead and say intentional thought for growth. We don't want to see a 4-story building, even with a setback in front of us. We don't want to see a car dealership with dancing socks to entertain their latest sales. We would like you to go ahead and take a look at the medical park you put there, the medical parks that are all around. Maybe when you get off of the interstate at 288, you can go ahead and say, this is a statement that's Goochland. Flip back to that lovely green space. Flip back to some of those pretty things you actually presented. Thank you.
Next speaker is Rob Williamson. Rob Williamson, excuse me.
Good evening. Good evening. I do want to say that I agree with a lot of people here that it's been repackaged well, and we like that, and a lot of things are simple. But some of the details are a little mysterious. The previous consultant had a breakdown of multiple zonings with comparable densities, and a lot of the feedback about it being a lot like Short Pump was based on those high densities. Currently, residential RPUD, a high density, is 2 units per acre. 2.5, up to 2.5. And the current mixed use is 6 units per acre. Now, we worked really hard on Mannequin Town and Tuckahoe Bridge, and I think we got a good product out of that with RPUD in a currently medium use area, which is 1 unit per acre, okay, on the average. Now notice on your map, the upper left-hand corner, there's 136 acres that are zoned for the neighborhood residential. I just want to point out, the first 4 that you have, mixed use, transition, commercial, and neighborhood residential, all include townhomes. Well, the feedback from the public on don't make this Short Pump, you don't want the majority of this map to reflect townhomes. That's one problem that I have with it. So I think we had a good product with the current mixed use, the MPUD at 6. But what I don't see here is a good transition from what we have now with the 2.5 RPUD and the 6 in MPUD, and the single family, there's a reference in here that it's 2 to 4. I mean, that 4 almost doubles the current 2.5. So there needs to be, I think, MPUD standard now. There needs to be a compelling argument why these other zonings would need to exceed 6. I don't know what the right number is. That's going to be for the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission to determine. But it needs to be closer to 6 than 16 as the previous consultant shared with us in their presentations. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. That was the last of our speakers that signed up. I do want to give opportunity for additional people to just raise your hand. I see Ms. Moore here. We do want to respect everybody's time, so kind of keep it to around 3 minutes, and then you could always come back and talk again. Here we are. Linda Moore.
Thank you. I share most of the people in here, all of the people in here, even Mr. Gazer. Thank you, Mr. Gazer. Over the years, I have been living here over 42 years now. I've seen the growth to where Rockville and now we're no longer in Rockville, we're in Mannequin Sabbath, has morphed into something that is not anywhere near what we consider rural in nature. We have worked very diligently and hard with developers to get them down to here with a comp plan. This will really change the comp plan significantly, and the reason we were able to work with the developers is because the foundation was the comp plan. Even though it is a guide, it is a good guide. to land use that is supported by the community. When you hear Bellevue Gardens and stuff like that, these are people who have been here, a lot of them, since birth. I mean, you know, we don't move out of Goochland once we get here. So I applaud this new format because now I can understand it. And that's part of when people come to me with questions, I try to get answers. But if I can't understand it, I don't know how I relay that to the rest of the community. But thank you so much. Like I said, this is a great way to get the word out.
Hi. I just want to know if anybody on the county commission has actually driven to the development that is on Winterfield Road up by Route 60. It is beautifully done, and I would like to know if any of the developers have seen that. I would be so proud to have a development that looked like that in this area. It is gorgeous.
Hi, my name's Donald Swank, and I was wondering if you could pull the traffic map back up that you had at the very beginning and explain that to me at very...
You want the one with
showing
proposed or existing?
The one that was shown where the traffic goes, like 70% is going east. And
Oh, yeah,
is
yeah,
going
yeah,
west.
yeah.
Maybe if you could just explain that a little more to me.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't understand why none is, unless I'm missing something, why nothing, there's a 0%.
This chart looks different, oops, sorry, it looks different than the, yeah, something's going on with the way it has come through on the PowerPoint. It doesn't show that. I don't have the draft plan in front of me right now, but
Because it.
yeah, if you take a look at the
That's
draft.
gonna eventually make people's decisions, I don't think these are very,
No,
it doesn't sound.
that's not what it says in the draft plan.
It's actually 10%. Here it is.
I'm not-
Yeah, it's something the way this projector.
Access transportation corridors, but there is
There you go.
288 going through Goochland. I would imagine that would be more than 5%. That would have to be. When you got 288 going through Goochland like that, it's, I don't know if anybody's ever got on 288 in here, but it's gotten huge. So that's wrong right there. You're saying the traffic's 5%.
Well, so that is just pulled off of VDOT traffic data, so they have traffic counts.
What I'm saying is if somebody's
Yeah,
making
yeah.
a plan off of all this, it's going wrong.
That number other than 5?
Anyway, that was all I had. That was all I had to say.
That one was the 10, I believe.
The other one was a lower.
What I'm saying
That
is
was 5 here.
statistics drive everything in the government.
Let me steal that real quick.
Yep. Yep.
15.
Yeah, my name's Austin, I'm the transportation manager for the county. It's supposed to say 15%, something with the graphic translation from the computer up here didn't quite, did I turn this off?
It doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work, okay. It's supposed to be 10% on 64 east and west, and then 15% on Route 288. And again, that data is pulled directly from VDOT's traffic counts.
I've been watching that when 288 first opened. There's hardly any traffic on there. Now it's like a big, it's huge. It's gotten huge. It's bigger than 64, I think, on this, or it's like an extension of 64. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that, so didn't want any, I know how statistics can get the government, somebody up at the top that just goes by statistics, they don't see what's anything else. Anyway, just want to let you know.
Thank you, and we do have people watching at home, so when you do speak, if you could speak into the microphone. I know we're having trouble with our microphones, so there might be a little bit of a back and forth, but just for the benefit of the folks at home, we want to be able to hear everyone.
Thank you, Tom Winfrey. Just a question. I don't know how sacred a name is, but has any discussion been taking place to change the name from Centerville to like Mannequin Village or? That's a can of worms.
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Winfrey. There was some discussion.
No answer?
No, we did have some discussion. We did have some discussion initially, and there was great interest in retaining the names.
My name is Scott Pettit, and I worked for the county planning department back in the early 80s, and I'm familiar with the comprehensive plan and the village concept, which was beautiful. The problem back then is we didn't anticipate short pump. The short pump is sort of the domino falling on Centerville. And my problem is two things, traffic and trash. If you don't address the traffic when you do this comprehensive plan, you're going to fail miserably. And if you don't incorporate into the Centerville plan what's going on north of Ashland Road, north of 64, you're going to be in trouble. Because the traffic on Ashland Road is horrible. The traffic going through Centerville is not great. And if you don't have some sort of a traffic pattern to deal with all that, and you try to do it in arrears, you're going to fail miserably. So think about it and just do it right. I mean, I know it's going to happen. But just really think about the traffic, because if the traffic is bad, it's going to fail. So anyway, those are my 2 cents, but I really think you really need to take into consideration what's going on Ashland Road north of 64. So anyway.
So I will address the traffic on Ashland Road. So right now, we are hoping to receive full funding on an interchange solution at Ashland Road and 64, which will really clear up that north or southbound north of 64 backlog that we see in both the AM and the PM.
What are you planning on doing?
The plan right now is for a divergent diamond interchange, which would put you on the opposite side. So we're going to build a second bridge. Yeah, so if you've ever been to Zion's Crossroads, that's the intent there, and the intent with that interchange design is to facilitate a lot of that industrial traffic.
You go 4-lane or 6-lane road?
It's the plan right now is to 4-lane it just in the vicinity of the interchange, and then as more development comes along the frontage, such as Project Rocky. Oh, sorry, I apologize. As development comes, much like Project Rocky, we're going to be expecting development to expand Ashland Road to 4 lanes.
When was the last time that you actually did a traffic count right there on 64 at the Bellevue Gardens interchange?
So for traffic counts right at Bellevue Gardens, we do make pretty much every major commercial development and residential development study traffic. The medical office facility that you referenced going across the street, across Broad Street, did have to study that traffic. I don't have the data directly in front of me, but I'm happy to look that up and provide some information.
Please do.
Mr. Andrews?
My name is George Andrews. I want to thank y'all for everybody for all the work that has been put into this. I know it's been going on for a long time, and it's nice to see it develop at least at this point. One concern I have is I happen to notice some information on the Hockett Road, Ashland Road project, realignment of Hockett Road. And this is on the Goochland County website dealing with the Hockett Road, Ashland Road project. And what it says here is there is apparently some intent to do away with the current stoplight right there where Hockett Road meets Broad Street, continues on across St. Matthews, and to make that a right turn lane only coming out of Hockett, and you come out of South Matthews to make it a right turn only. I don't understand why that would even be considered. For all the people back in Reader's Branch and all back there, for them not to be able to go straight across and just make a left turn and go on up Broad Street, or keep straight across and go to the Food Line Shopping Center and shop over there, and why they would have to make a right turn and come across a realignment road down to Ashland, then make a left turn, or go back behind where Pepper Barrel is now. I know this is not on the agenda, but it seems to me that all the people in here need to be aware of this. And I've never known of another situation from Broad Street, from downtown Richmond, all the way out here, where a stoplight has been eliminated at the interchange. and you make a right turn out only. And I know you don't have the answers there, but I would certainly like some answers on that. It seems to me that the county and the highway department would be creating an unreasonably dangerous situation by doing that for traffic. So I appreciate you hearing me out on that and look forward to talking with you about it.
Thank you for that feedback, sir, and I will absolutely say that the county as a whole has very emerging and complex transportation needs, given the limited connector roads and just the interchanges that we find ourselves with. But I will say that staff will stick around afterwards to answer specific transportation questions or take information and follow up with you. We're really here and wanting to hear any questions that you all may have about our proposed plans, thoughts, especially as we head into public hearings coming up. So again, staff will be sticking around for one-off questions on things that are related or indirectly related to these plans. But again, wanting to hear from you guys, especially while we have our consultant here for any clarification or specific questions. So with that, checking to see if we've got any more questions, and I do apologize for the temperature in the room. We did not do that intentionally. I'm hot too. There is water. I don't know what's going on with the air conditioner, so maybe we'll get a nice little kudos bonus rental for next time, right? But any other questions? All right. Oh, yes, sir. One moment, please. Let us, Mr. Cash will bring you a microphone.
Thank you. I'd like to find out, first off, what commitments we have for land to use for roads. We have nothing but Centerville with Broad Street coming through. We have no alternate roads to get people off of Anakin Road. And you're going to take the village and transform it by adding more traffic, but you're not solving the traffic problems. And you first need to start out with deciding where the roads are going to be, purchase the property, if nothing more. That needs to be done. We've been dumped on as the cash cow of the county. And with 15% supposedly of the county going to be developed, it seems like it's all right here in Centerville. And you haven't done anything for the roads. We're taking care of a traffic problem down at Goochland Courthouse area with 522 and Fairground Road and where it comes together. 522 is a basic north-south highway, and we've got a disaster that's being put together where trucks can't even get through there without blowing tires. And now we're going to go ahead and try and increase the traffic here in Centerville, and we haven't even addressed any of the traffic. We're looking at it and saying 70%. 70% of what? It's 70% of how big a number? Where are we going with this? How are we getting them through the town? We're not making sense when we don't plan roads ahead of time. You have to decide where you're going to have the roads, and then you can figure out where the development's going to be. You can't put a business where you don't have roads.
Thanks, sir. I'm behind you. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anyone, hold on, we've got some folks that have not asked questions yet, so let's get to them first. I saw two hands come up over here.
Hi, one of the weaknesses of the previous plan was there was no indication of how many people were eventually going to live inside the other plan. Now, I realize this is way lower. It appears that you're going from 6-story buildings to 3, maybe 2, depending on what picture you're looking at. But, I'd like to know how many people, given these densities, are going to live here. And that feeds into, of course, what this gentleman just was saying about traffic. How can you possibly know what roads you need if you have no clue? And it would seem to be a very basic thing that you would have as part of your plan.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you touched on that. So one of the things that this is this is the foundation, almost as you think of it for a home. And based on the recommended next steps that we have, we'll continue to build tools in the toolbox. So one of the other things that we have that we're working on is updating our master transportation plan. Also looking at a multimodal and connectivity plan. We're continually identifying transportation projects in conjunction with our evolving needs. So it is something that we're looking at in a holistic fashion. This is just primarily looking at a very high level. Just like our comprehensive plan, it's a high-level document, and then everything then is a secondary piece of that. So we are working to address that. And I will say that in regards to the population piece and or the development piece, within the plan itself, there is a map that's been generated by county staff, actually our GIS manager, Mr. Worley, that actually shows the current build out and what is still available for build out for both courthouse and Centerville, and that is in the plans that are online, and we have hard copies in the back to look at this evening.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to seeing that, but I remember you in a meeting saying that there were 2,049 people living in Centerville at some point in time. I suppose that was the census or something along those lines, one of the working meetings. And I did a back of the envelope guess based on your half a square mile of core, which is maybe not quite applicable anymore. And we were talking an additional somewhere between 8,000 to 16,000 people. So we should get like some basic idea of how many people.
And we will be performing scenario modeling as this plan moves forward. That's one of our core things. We plan on working with Plan RVA, our regional planning organization, on some of that. That is a new functionality that they are taking on to assist localities with. And that's one of the great things is being a member of that organization. But one of the first tools is trying to outline, you can't really project your population without knowing what potential proposed land use might be and what that vision is for the future. So that helps drive what your population could be in the future.
Crystal, can you just give us a quick recap of what happens after tonight? I'm concerned that the planning commission meeting next week. There's a lot of concern being shared tonight, significant issues, not enough time. What should we anticipate happening from the input you received tonight, and what can we anticipate being updated or changed between now and next week when it goes to the planning commission?
Absolutely, Mr. Casella, and you and I have talked extensively on this. So one thing I want to emphasize is though, it may seem that this process has changed. One thing I will say is the only thing that's changed is our consultant. We, and I stood before a lot of you all back at, Grace Chinese Baptist Church, I think, I've been here 6 months. So I stood there and said, we wanted to make sure that we were thoughtful and that folks were heard. So one of the things that we did is we realized that was not reflected. However, where we were with having public open community meetings in the week after Thanksgiving and then the very beginning of December, we actually had a joint planning commission in January, and then it was slated for planning commission public hearings in February and board in March. So it was never intended with the original timeline that there was going to be massive, major substantive changes from what dropped right before Thanksgiving and then what was going to go to the planning commission in February. I will say that what we've worked here is to spend extensive time going back through all of the video footage, all of the online comments, which were hundreds. There was over 12-month almost. We kind of cut it off at the very beginning of March of a comment period. We're going to then be working with tonight's feedback, right? Taking that and synthesizing it into a memo that will be provided to the Planning Commission for discussion at the public hearing. They will have an opportunity to get that in advance, to ask any questions of things that were raised tonight. And again, nothing signed, sealed, and delivered until the board approves it. So I do want to emphasize that, but they will be getting a memo, just like the board will get a memo from anything that's discussed or brought up at the public hearings for the Planning Commission. And so at that point, we will have those as an appendix to the actual plans, and they will stay as part of that. And again, this is a high-level framework. We have a robust listing, and I will fumble through this inevitably, but that's okay, because it's just such a great layout. I love this room. This was not my first choice. I voted for fire station. I was overruled. We could have had the bay windows open by now. So one of the things, recommended next steps. So recommended next steps. It really talks about the next thing. So this is really the fundamental building block, but it's not setting anything in stone. This is a plan, and there's not action that immediately this changes anything. Zoning's not immediately changing. Design guidelines aren't changing. Our overlay districts aren't changing. And that was one of the challenges we saw with our last plan. Everything was layered into it, down to exactly what would be on each parcel. So this is trying to take it where we have flexibility that then works for what may evolve with the residential and commercial markets, what we may see as evolving needs for our service sector or residential needs in a community, and as well as our transportation needs. You may recall our previous plan had extensive proposed road networks without much rationalization as to why. There was just a lot of proposed road networks. Really, this is trying to lay out what we have, what's potentially approved, for instance, for transportation, and then focusing on where you could then, as development applications come in, whether it's a small commercial, medium or large, or small residential to medium and large, where you can foster those opportunities for the connectivity of sidewalks, trails, roads, and connecting communities to other communities so that you keep people off of Broad Street Road, because it's not Broad Street, it's Broad Street Road, and those types of opportunities. But this is a working document, so it's not ever designed just to sit on a shelf and then we don't take any recommended next steps or other things. So I hope that helps somewhat.
It does to some degree, but specifically the land use map.
We already had someone over here
Oh.
that's been waiting to speak.
Apologies. We can talk later, Mr. Costello. You know my phone number. You actually got my cell number. Yes, sir.
Hi.
Apologies.
You had on the screen for traffic patterns. You have 70% of the traffic was coming from east on Broad Street, and they go back. How do they turn around to go back? Because if you go past Hockett, if you go west on Broad Street, there's no turnaround.
So
Do they
that-
have plans to put a circle west of Hockett when you come out of the food line, or?
No, sir. This is the general.
That map is actually 64, I think, the interchange right there, so it's not necessarily all coming into, on Broad Street right there. It's just, the graphic on the map has been skewed, yeah.
Yes, and it's kind of showing that they're coming from both directions, in and out. So the idea is both of those areas just show in and out. So they're coming to that area,
Yep.
in and out. So again, it's a generalization, and this representation on the laptop screen is accurate. Whatever translated onto that is not. I can promise you that what we have in the proposed plans actually reflects the true percentages, the 70%, 15, 5, and 10. So technical difficulties, just like the AC tonight. Mea culpa.
Okay, so where are these people turning around to head back east?
It's just traffic count, so it's just
These are
counting
traffic
cars.
counts,
Yeah,
purely
this is
based on
traffic.
VDOT
Yep.
traffic count.
Broad Street where
Yep.
they can do that.
That's up to you.
All right, we've got a hand over here and a hand over here. Who's gonna get the lucky first card? And we'll work to take a couple last few questions and wrap it up. And again, staff will hang around afterwards for a bit to chat with everyone.
Hi,
Yes.
my name is Dan Korn. I find it interesting watching us. You have a tough job. You got two factions, basically. You got the factions of people who say, I'm a Goochlinger, I don't want to see any change, or not much. And then you got the group that say, we got to grow, we got to make it happen. Trying to make that happen, make everybody happy is going to be an impossible situation for you. God bless you all.
We're public servants, it's just a job. It's what we sign up for.
I'm Jeff Graves. I'd just like to recommend somebody take another look at those greenways. If you look at your basic map, and you take the floodplain, you draw a green line through it, you call it a greenway. And I asked the predecessor how to do this, he just winked at me and said, oh, that's up to the engineers. If you try to do that and make it along the floodplain like that, it's going to be an engineering disaster. And unless you want to make it a boardwalk, which would be prohibitively expensive. So just somebody should take a look at that, because it really, if you look at the basic map and look at the floodplains, and just draw a green line through it, that's your greenway. And I don't think that's going to work.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna work on wrapping this up. Staff is gonna stick around for a few minutes afterwards, so feel free to chat with one of us. And as always, you can call Goochland County and we will work to be responsive to you. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We appreciate your time and acclimating to the nice warm weather.